The need for security can never be overstated. According to a paper published by Dublin Business School and Liverpool John Moores University, while terror attacks in India did not have a significant impact on the stock market volatility, they did play a factor in investor sentiment. The need to safeguard organizations, people and assets have led corporates to invest heavily in private security agencies. With 7 million security guards as against 1.4 million police officers, India has 5 times as many private security personnel than police officers. This disparity is the highest in the world. The equipping and training of this major workforce to deal with emergency situations cannot be overemphasized. It is important to look at the challenges faced by the private security sector and look for constructive steps to overcome these challenges.
Hello and welcome to another episode of India Risk Report, and in this episode we are looking very specifically at an extremely important facet of our lives these days, especially in the cities, the private guarding, manpower and security services that have become virtually the thing that people are beginning to rely on in the absence of our police forces and security elements being so stretched for VIP duties, at the same time other traditional duties that the police and security bodies do. So therefore, India's private security industry has been growing at an average of 25% annually as against 7% globally. And the reason for this is that more and more companies and individuals and high net value businessmen are resorting to private security cover since the police and security forces are stretched, taking on various other responsibilities. And we have with us two hands-on experts who understand the subject and who are deeply involved with it. We have Major Rajayan, who is now a very big name in the private security industry business and continues to have a very strong footprint, particularly in North India in the private security industry business, but is in other areas also. And we have General Chaith, who was formerly an army commander, has very distinguished military track record, and after the military, as is becoming the norm now, some very capable officers are being picked up by very high profile industrial bodies and companies as advisors. And General Chaith, I'm told, has been an advisor both with the Adanis and the Reliance Group of Anil Ambani, and now is advising them and some others. I'll start with you, Major Rajayan. There's been a huge growth in this industry, and the growth is largely being put on to the fact that the desire on the part of big corporate houses, for example, to pay for and take security cover from something like CISF is hugely expensive. An average CISF Jawan costs 50,000 rupees as against an average guarding agency Jawan may cost 10 to 15,000 rupees. But that apart, the CISF brings to bear the fact that they can carry weapons. In today's world, the terrorists and others who will come to target you cannot be pushed off by sticks and stones. So how do you manage to keep your forces in the mindset to be able to deal with the real threat when it comes?
Thank you very much, sir. And very interestingly, this is an industry which I've been associated for a very, very long time, 25 years in fact now, and before that with the army and police. But very interestingly, this industry has been going from phenomenally, like you very rightly said. It today employs nearly 7 million people in this country, which I think is a very huge number. Probably the largest security force, private security force in any country in the world. You very rightly pointed out that it's very difficult or maybe expensive for corporates to go and hire paramilitary forces like CISF. One, because of the exorbitant cost, which obviously impacts commercial interests of industries, but more importantly also because of their non-availability. You may not be able to hire CISF for every corporation that needs to hire them. We as a private security industry constantly train our people to get them prepared for various eventualities. Obviously, an unarmed security guard can't be expected to be facing armed terrorists, but in whatever way possible, and there is a proper guideline laid down by the government, which comes out of the Private Security Agencies Regulation Act.
So I'll come to the guidelines subsequently. You are preparing them, and I know there are technologies available to assist good guarding services without the use of an AK-47 to counter an AK-47. But General Saab, sir, at the bigger picture, does it ever meet the calculations and the discussions of the boards of big companies that the important role good security services could play in their growth patterns, in the investor confidence in those companies, and in them being able to achieve many of their objectives uninterrupted? Because the normal complaint is that the chief security officers of large organizations are hired because of their very impressive professional profile, special forces officers or whatever, but then left to fend for themselves. The CEO doesn't have times for them. The CEOs are only looking at profit margins.
I think, firstly, everybody realizes that in a well-defended India, Indians don't feel very secure. And if this is true, then I think as part of the corporate responsibility, the private sector, as well as any other sector, would like to contribute to securing India. And hence, it fits into their plan to serve the nation, as also to promote the business interests. So definitely it fits into their agenda. It fits into the scenario that we are in, realizing the fact that we live in a very dangerous part of the world, which is South Asia.
Okay, that's the big picture, and I can't share the general sentiments. But Major Rajayan, 80% of private security guards, as per statistics brought up, are not skilled in their duties. So while we may talk about that you are training them to counter a possible terror attack, most of them are just filling the requirements of numbers in a lot of large bodies. They don't know even essentials about where this complex is located. They don't know what are the exit routes from a complex in the event of an eventuality. And certainly the entry gates in the front areas are more impressive than are the back entries, as is often the case in hotels. So where do you sort of get the balance right in terms of the skills required and the skills available?
You are absolutely right. I think skills is an area which really needs hard work in this particular industry. Skills come essentially out of training, which is carried out over a long period of time, and obviously it has a cost associated to it. That is what actually defines the whole industry. Today, we have two kinds of players in the industry: the organized sector and the unorganized sector. In the organized sector by itself, there are national players and there are regional players. In India, I think the national players are total between them, I think there would be about 8 or 10 of them, together do just about 20% of the business. And another about 10 to 15% are the regional players who we would call the organized sector. So if you look at it, it's only 35% of the whole sector which is organized and the 65% which is unorganized. This puts a huge amount of price pressure. So when a client calls for tenders, he's not looking at getting the best service, he's looking at the cheapest service. And that is how the skill and the training cost is not really correctly addressed, and therefore the deficiency in the skill.
Jain Saab, to take this point further to the big picture, now 28% of the respondents who were checked and asked how many hours do policemen on an average put, and they said many cases work could be up to 14 hours a day. Yeah. So the police is stretched. Now if you look at it from any other statistical point, and the number, one of the numbers that often does the round in discussions is the fact that the UN mandated requirement of having policemen per citizen is something like about 122 policemen for every 1 lakh citizen, whereas our figures fall woefully short. But then again, I mean, those figures may better apply to Scandinavia. India is different. In the case of India, what we need is to augment physical security with technology, which is a huge force multiplier. But again, that would require an investment, because it's easiest to say कि ठीक है 10 guard लाके दे दो और इधर उधर खड़ा कर दो. But when you need to put that many more monitoring units, and I'm not just talking about CCTVs, because CCTVs only give you the picture after the bomb has burst. How do you prepare and prevent that from happening? So what is the mix that big companies on a percentage scale would be looking to put an investment towards, from technologies vis-a-vis the guard on the ground?
This is actually a relationship between a service provider, such as what Manjeet does, and a buyer of a service. By and large, people are looking at prophylactic security because they feel that by positioning or proximate security in the form of a physical human being, the threat is going to get deterred. This is the basic format in which security is perceived today. Security of material and individual. But security has gone much beyond all this, as threats have started to bypass the physical frontiers or the boundaries in which the security is to be managed. Now the question is that, is a person ready to pay for the effect, or is it a person or an agency or an entity ready to pay for the person? So it is a mix between the two. Good companies should be able to accept that it is the effect which is needed and hence should be able to pay, but I think it is still some time away. And in a scenario when you are looking at L1 as a winner, the technology gets compromised, and it is always the L1, which is the lowest value of the tender, which enables poor quality to be provided, and hence the effects gets diluted.
It's very well put, sir. We'll debate that after break, where we will also look at issues related with how the best models of security internationally could apply to India, but that after a break. Welcome back. We continue to have our two experts looking at the private guarding security scenario in India and the booming private security industry and its implications for India's economy. Most importantly, to what extent we should be looking at making a right mix between technology and the human guard cover, and what investments are required. To that extent, Major Rajan, do you think the government has been doing enough to give you all the support, to cover your growth, and to give you that extra edge that you need to make up for the shortfall of armed policemen where high-profile targets are being guarded by you?
Unfortunately, no, not so far. This industry is seriously stressed. The biggest stress, of course, is that that of finances, because we work on very thin margins. With things like GST coming in, it adds to the cost pressure. So no, not yet. Although the government has been proactive in instituting an act which ensures that there's regulation, but that act is not yet implemented across the states everywhere.
And also the PASARA Act you're talking about.
That's right. That's the act.
Yeah, because that again requires a certain number of days of training.
That's right.
And a lot of private security agencies just put the guard on the doorstep somewhere and say 21 दिन की तुम्हारी ये training भी चल रही है और duty भी पूरी कर रही है. So unfortunately, it's a bit of a sham because of the pressures on each company to produce the numbers.
And at the same time, the government has now said that the security guard, they brought out a regulation in 2016 which says the security guard is to be now seen as a skilled worker, which elevates his wages, which obviously again puts pressure on the budgets of the corporations which hire guards. So they're not going to double their budget overnight. Therefore, they will be reducing the number of guards. That actually opens a door for technology to come in. Exactly like sir was saying, it's going to take some time because people are used to seeing people, guards at a gate, but it's going to take a little bit of time. But technology definitely has to play a part. And like you rightly said, not just as like a CCTV, it has to be something like remote monitoring, it has to be smart analytics, it has to be smart technology, and that would actually bring in the right man-machine amalgamation.
Right, that's true. But General Sir, what has been your understanding of the best practices abroad? Two countries that often come up in discussion are the UK, where security companies are governed primarily through a Private Security Act, and also there is a much greater involvement of the civil society within the security framework, which helps the police and others get everybody involved in the security business. And it's not an attitude that I've paid you guys, now you make sure that I'm safe. In the United States, there is still an ongoing legal discussion which started in 1976 about what should be the amendments to the federal laws for the deployment of various security people within the country and overseas. And some American companies did come into a lot of visibility in Iraq and other parts of the world. So, I mean, there are various levels at which things are happening. What do you think immediately? You made a very pertinent point about the need to get the technology and the human mix right. But what do you think would be the immediate takeaways from best practices abroad?
In my views, I think the first thing is any security agency would deliver if there is empowerment. You know, when we see very often in the streets of Delhi and Gurgaon, various traffic marshals are being put inside to assist the traffic police. But at that point in time, what people don't seem to understand is that that gentleman who's standing and doing that bit to assist the people and regulate the traffic still lacks the empowerment. Mm-hmm. Now, whether the empowerment would come at an early stage or it will come little later is different. But empowerment, this problem of empowering a person who's doing a duty in aid of people or in aid of agencies can also be better managed if we look at technology. Now, I'll take a minute here. We have large number of applications. And if these applications can be harnessed in terms of predictive analysis, which is being supported by the private security people, still the accountability and responsibility can rest with the police forces, but the feed is available to them for looking at a much larger area of community policing, etc., etc. So what I'm trying to say, it is a two-stage process. Initially, if we find that it is not possible to empower a person to come to the assistance, then we can look at technology in terms of applications while ensuring the accountability and responsibility remains with the police till the time the empowerment of these people who are employed comes in. These companies that you talked of, Iraq, etc., they were empowered.
Very well put. But Major Rajan, you know, there's another issue that continues to nag me, that, you know, there is a lot of ambiguity between what was to have been regulations and what is implemented on the ground. Also, there seems to be a disconnect between the police, which is more focused on providing VIP security than securing every citizen. And they are pushed because of their long working hours, they're pushed because of the demands of VIPs, and they are pushed also not to assist you all unless you have a good talmail with them and good relationship with the nearest police station where they will go along with you. So, what do you feel are the doable things on the ground and how they can overcome the challenges as they exist?
So I'll take it on from where General Chaith just pointed out. empowerment, and what happens in countries overseas. So I don't know much about US as yet, but in UK, similar to US, there has been a debate going on what the private security agencies can do or cannot. And though we passed our Private Security Agencies Regulation Act in 2005, they only got it together in 2001, which is just 4 years before us, despite being a very old and mature.
And also, let me remind you that 2005, the draft that was put together didn't factor in a 2611 type scenario, which happened after 2005.
Right.
So the dynamics and the whole matrix has changed.
Yeah, I think the act that we put together is a more bureaucratic attempt, and it should have the involvement of the industry. One part of it is that law and order is a state subject, and this law is by the central government. So unless every state then sets up its own guidelines, own rules, sets up a regulator, this is always going to remain a challenge. More importantly, if you have to have a director who has to be certified for a particular place, the police verification has to be done for every state separately. So it's actually become a very cumbersome act. I think there is some proactivity in the government now to change it to some extent, and we shall wait to see what happens. But what happens in a country like UK, the agencies are rated. So there is a platinum rating, which means when this private security agency, which is monitoring something through a control room or through proactive intelligence, calls upon the police is then duty bound to react. It has to answer that call if you are a platinum rated company. Similar to this, in Singapore, if you see, companies are rated A, B, and C. We own a security company there which is graded. Now, the top 3 security agencies in Singapore are called auxiliary police force, and the government can call upon them to act as supplementary police forces, and they do. So they do a lot of that kind of work for the government. They guard they guard the police stations for the police. They guard jails. They run jails, in fact.
Something like a territorial army in the case of war.
That's right.
Okay, I'll just
Can I just come into this, this point which was raised now, and what was stated earlier with regards to the incentivization that the government is putting in. One of the areas which is not very well discussed and analyzed is the support that the government has provided to the synergistic sector of coastal and inland security. It is a part mandated, it is a part of the offset discharge regime. And if we look at this offset discharge regime, it can enable better technology to come in, it can enable skills to come in and help create that empowerment after a skilled force or a skilled person is available to assist the paramilitary or the police forces. So there can be a good option which is available, which is existing as per law study.
Yeah, and therefore the last comment in terms of offset discharge, in terms of technology, we hear a lot of talk about offsets, but in reality nothing has happened on the ground. What is a realistic timeline when offsets will really come into play and provide us made in India, globally oriented technology available for security of people and our businesses?
Your observation is very valid. The problems were more in terms of implementation of the offset regime. But I'm very certain that the present government, with the new policy which they are come out with, the draft at the moment is on the website, 3rd of May, and they are looking at directed offsets. And directed offsets along with some other support in the infrastructure sector in terms of locations where large number of multiples are available, I definitely see that this is going to be used as a major tool to do Make in India.
Well, on that happy and optimistic note, despite the subject being an extremely important one, we have to say thank you to you both. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.